Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 22 transfer plans. I've waited a little bit of time to actually record this video. I just wanted a little bit more information from the FA Cup games. I knew we kind of had this break anyways in terms of just time for people to actually sit back and digest, not really make any moves, but just wait and watch, whether we have injury updates and things like that. So that's sort of why the video's been delayed. We are planning to do a wildcard video on top of the usual cheat sheet and the team selection. So if you're looking forward to those types of videos, feel free to stay tuned for that. We have been streaming all this time, so hopefully we could maybe do the reaction type streams now that I'm actually back with my usual setup in London, but just happy to record now and get back into the swing of things with FPL. So Game Week 21 for me was not perfect. In fact, I think that's 5 red arrows in a row. I have to say also, like, the rank that I'm at now, I'm still very happy with it. 49,000 is pretty good for where we're at in terms of the overall length of the season. Does it feel worse in the sense that a couple of weeks ago I was only around, I don't know, 6, 7K? Absolutely, and the red arrows do hurt in that sense. But I think now that we've been able to roll the transfer, I was pretty happy with playing Kroupi Jr. So I think, I would have been playing Sobo over Kroupi Jr., which I probably wouldn't have enjoyed. We got the double Arsenal clean sheet, which is nice. Pretty dismaying sort of midfield, returns with the fixtures in mind. Cunha had a good game, didn't really get to make much of it, and got subbed off early. So he clearly is on the chopping block for me. I think he's going to go as soon as possible. And Bruno or Tavernier, I think, are my targets. Lefay, I actually... Look, I mean, when someone misses a penalty and that suddenly creates a huge swing, so I think Thiago scored right off of that. Collins kept his clean sheet. Kelleher got a penalty save. These are the types of outcomes in FPL where you just can't feel too bad about it. This will happen in football. You can say Kelleher is a great penalty, shot stopper. Did he start the season with this sort of rate of penalty saves? No. And the only thing I'd say is, having a player on penalties is something that puts you in a position to do well. And this time it just didn't work out, right? So you can't feel too bad about that in FPL. In terms of the swing and I think the overall ramifications in rank, I think that's been pretty brutal. In general, with the sort of anyone who's made similar moves in terms of Ekitike to Thiago, we discussed that last week. We knew that we were going to be facing a really tough Thiago game, which was Sunderland at home. But we now have Ekitike versus Burnley at home, so I don't feel too bad about that because I've already made the decision, right? I'm invested into more so fixtures than form per se. Not that Thiago had any form heading into Everton away, but just the idea that Ekitike is actually a really solid pick still, in my opinion, and he actually has Burnley at home still. This is kind of the plan. We're going to stick to it. Keane got suspended, which I think is sort of perfect for me because he was always going to be my transfer out. O'Reilly, we started to see actually how his minutes can be quite fallible, even without Ryan Nuri, even without Guardiola, even without Ruben Diaz. So just like, for example, how they lined up in the FA Cup, we're probably going to see a little bit more of Ake in the season. I don't think Ake has been brilliant by any means. O'Reilly actually scored coming off the bench versus Exeter. Not that it means anything, but I think the idea is this. O'Reilly's actually been a player who's played way too many minutes. I looked at his FPRef page, and I think effectively starting from the beginning of November, he's a 20-year-old, of course, who's young and can play more games, but has effectively been playing a fixture every week for around 90 minutes per match, for 3 days or every 3 days. And that includes international break games where I think he played 2 successive 90s for England. And so you're in a position where I think he clearly was gassed, and we saw that in recent matches, and I think that's been reflected with his poor minutes. I'm hoping now with a little bit more of a break with Ake coming into the team, actually giving, sparing him from playing all the minutes, that O'Reilly can come back and start a few games. But Ryan Nuri is also back too. So that is the kind of concerning piece. And clearly O'Reilly's sort of, lasting power within my team is not going to be that long. What I do like about some of the fixtures with Man City is I think you can clearly spot and see when Pep will rotate over the next few games, and because City also is the team that's scheduled to play first in terms of the fixture schedule for the next few weeks, like here in Game Week 22, like here in Game Week 23, I'm hoping, well, not technically, but I mean close enough, and I'm kind of hoping that we still get enough information on O'Reilly for me to justify keeping him for the Wolves game and even for the United game, because I do actually really think that O'Reilly is a solid pick for that match. And yeah, I'm hoping that I can kind of call upon his services. When I think about the rest of my team, as I said, Keane and Cunha seem like the outs. Lefay actually took a penalty first in the shootout versus Everton in the FA Cup, where they actually won. He also scored a great goal. And I think he's still on pens, but I think Granit Xhaka probably also is someone who will lay claim to penalties potentially. He seemed very confident in his post-match interview in the FA Cup match where he won man of the match, in terms of responding to the penalty miss and his motivations on taking the next penalty. So I'm kind of hoping he keeps penalties. Regardless, this is a player here, when we look at the fixtures, we have kept him for West Ham away and Burnley at home and even Crystal Palace at home. So yeah, excited to sort of play him here. But it's going to be basically Richards set off against Lefay, and we can kind of show that with the team selection. With Kroupi Jr., I think that the big pro in terms of showing my team selection is, he is someone that can easily now move in a lot closer towards the front of my bench. I think he might even move ahead of Anderson in terms of the bench order. I think Kroupi Jr. is just an exceptional player. We've seen the talent that he has this season, so I really do think that he's a player that I would like to play more often than not. Especially now that we know the minutes will be good. This is because the Kluivert injury came about, right? So the reason why I actually play Kroupi Jr. going back to Gameweek 21, and a lot of people ask me why, is, well, I didn't think Ekitike was going to play good minutes versus Arsenal because the reporting on him and Slot's comments on him suggested that I don't think he was really ready to play that match. Now, he ended up being out the squad, so you can't really feel too good about it. Richards also had to be put on the bench because Glasner effectively mentioned that he wouldn't play. Unless he was going to come off the bench. As far as Sobo, I was backing a double Arsenal result, so I felt like playing Anderson ahead of Sobo made sense. And in terms of getting the just getting him into the squad. As far as Kroupi Jr., I felt super comfortable playing him because I think a lot of people actually focus on Irola's comments incorrectly in terms of how they've assessed his minutes. I think it's very obvious he had to start because if you kind of listen to the comments that Irola has made about him this season, it's sort of, he's explaining why Kroupi Jr. is not a 90-minute player, and I think it's very fair. Everyone understands why he's not a 90-minute player. Part of that is he's young. Part of that is he doesn't press for the entire match. Part of that is you want to manage both things at once as well, whilst you have depth players. And structurally, from a tactical point of view, I think he sees Kroupi Jr. possibly more as a 10, although he describes them as being twin nines, effectively. When you play, let's say, Evan Nilsson ahead and Kroupi Jr. behind, or let's say Enes Unal ahead and Kroupi Jr. behind. Now, I think Enes Unal might be injured anyways, which once again bolsters Kroupi Jr.'s minutes for this week. But I think it's just the idea that where do the best Bournemouth players operate in different positions? With Semenyo being out, you now have more players who need to play wing minutes, and that's also less players who can probably also occupy the 10 position within the team. So these are players like Tavernier, Scott to an extent, and that's partially the injury situation as well, right? Kluivert being out means you don't have a 10. Scott, I think, might have picked up an injury. When we go back to Tyler Adams, I think he's picked up something that's required surgery potentially, or at least he's out for a while. And so the lack of depth within the team just means Kroupi Jr. is going to play. I don't think Iraola is shying away from trying to play Kroupi Jr. He's well aware that this is a player who, proceeding to this match, scored 6 goals and now has scored 7. But I think that the key point here is that generally he's just trying to manage expectations. And I think Kroupi Jr., his minutes could look better and better going forwards. When you look at the FA Cup match, he actually played 90 minutes. He was subbed off versus Newcastle at 90 minutes, but I think that's purely because, unfortunately, once again, you don't really see Iraola have the confidence for him to play that many minutes. And I think it's a positive, though. This is a player who's usually been playing, when he starts, 45 to 65 minutes. He's now moving into hopefully being able to play more minutes, and therefore I have a lot of confidence that Kroupi Jr. is a very good pick. Across the board, in terms of me reviewing the fixtures, my takeaways from these games are, I still think West Ham and Forest are very, very poor. I thought West Ham were actually pretty solid in this game, but then lots of sort of individual defensive mistakes, which unfortunately is just a reflection of defense, like West Ham's poor defense this season. Bournemouth for Spurs, I would say the takeaway is Tavernier is a very good pick. For Brentford, I don't think there's too much to be said. I think it's Collins and Thiago and Kelleher for me. Even Shadi as well. These are all still strong picks, but Brentford are about to head into a very, very tough fixture run. So, Does it make sense to buy into a team that looks like they're performing exceptionally well? Of course, but at the same time, is it the wrong time potentially to buy back into a team if you've sort of divested recently? Probably, I would say not. Um, Palace actually seem like they're about to jump into a pretty good run. Nice to see them get back into getting a clean sheet. I'm actually quite interested, only in just Rodgers and Watkins from the Villa team, but actually Cash. His viability as a pick. And in terms of Palace, I mean, I think going back to it, I mean, Richards is at a really good price point, so he's right there. I don't think I'd really trust anyone who's sort of operating that right back position because Munoz is already in training. So you can already imagine the impacts there. Everton versus Wolves. Everton are about to head into a pretty poor fixture on themselves. I think this is a pretty good opportunity to jump out of Everton defense. So that's Keane and Tarka owners. They do have a couple players coming back soon, so that's a huge plus. But I think the negative, as I said, is the Everton fixture. So you can revisit possibly Everton attackers or the midfielders later. Garner actually took a penalty in the FA Cup, and so he could be interesting for Everton. So he's kind of raised his estimations in my cheat sheet, but I think the problem is, when maybe let's say someone like Dewsbury Hall is on the pitch, or Grealish is on the pitch, or even Njai's on the pitch, I can't really see him taking penalties. So is that going to have lasting power? Not really. Fulham versus Chelsea. I mean, Wilson's just incredible. So fair play to anyone who owns Wilson. He's clearly just having an absolutely magical season. I think got 1 goal, 1 assist, like coming off the bench in the FA Cup again. So yeah, just wonderful. Man City versus Brighton. I feel like every time we watch City, we're just not that impressed by the team overall. Have Haaland's numbers slowly fallen off or started to fall off? I think so a little bit. But does that make him that concerning? No, because there's not a single player in this game who's worth a lot of money who actually looks like he's worth a lot of money, other than maybe Bruno. And those are your 2 captaincy options, mostly week on week, unless people play versus Burnley at home or something like that. With United, I think Burnley actually just scored 2 screamers effectively. Not the screamer in terms of the first own goal there, but a very fluky goal, if we can put it like that. And I think on another day, United wins that game quite comfortably. But it's nice to see Bruno's back, and he's firmly in my mind. Newcastle versus Leeds, Bruno G taking a penalty is a bit of an interesting one. He did miss in the penalty shootout. I don't think that matters, but it suggests probably 5 to 10% penalty share, given that Gordon and Woltemade can both be on the pitch quite often, and Wissa was actually still on the pitch. So him being third penalty taker is interesting. Woltemade also missed in the shootout, but once again, as I said, I don't think that matters too much. Because it is shootout. It is a sort of different context. Arsenal versus Liverpool. I think Arsenal, this is probably their worst game of the season. I think Wolves is up there as one of the tough Arsenal games where you look at that Arsenal team and suggest that they aren't that good. But for the most of the season, I think you kind of have to close your eyes to games like this. Every team will have bad games here and there. Arsenal have been extremely defensively solid all season long. They got a clean sheet here. Got pretty fortunate because Conor Bradley's chance probably should have meant that they actually conceded it. But yeah, I think the attack was super lacking, and they do have a lot of players coming back like Havertz, and I think that can still change the narrative. With Chelsea, I think the only takeaway here is that I'm still not sure if Palmer's there. I think Enzo still looks interesting, but we have a new manager coming in, and he is part of the overall framework of this club, so I can't see much changing with Enzo, but he seems like maybe the pick that's most obvious alongside Chalobah now. For this Chelsea fixture run that's about to start here with Gameweek 22. And that's pretty much my take, right? I feel pretty happy about my team. I think Cunha is an out. I think Keane is an out. And that's pretty much it for this week. And I think Bruno on Gameweek 24 is someone we're going to revisit, right? Because Gameweek 22, you don't really want Bruno, although it is still City at home, which is not too bad. And then Gameweek 23, however, is just a poor game Arsenal way. So I think there is a situation in terms of just buying Bruno because there's no one else to buy, but I think you have an opportunity maybe to kind of just look into potentially a Tavernier. I quite like just securing Bruno, so I'll have 2 plans and walk through them right now. So we're back with the Fantasy Football Hub, my team pick and rating tool. As I say every week, this is the tool that I use to sort of manage and smooth out my team, just see how viable it is really to sort of play different players. And yeah, we're here with Gameweek 22, where I think clearly Cunha is a bit of a problem, although the expected points actually look quite high. I think once the sort of model factors in that Bruno's back, and and that takes away things like maybe penalties from Cunha and etc. That it's not particularly close. Not to mention also that I think his minutes are probably worse than let's say the model expectation. So I'm happy to kind of take the bet against that here. So to me, Cunha is an out. I think Bruno potentially is an in. And Mbumo is actually back as well. So if anyone's actually interested in Mbumo, he is back. But I think this is not the right time to really buy United players. But I think it's one of those cases where either I go for someone like Bruno G, who has two slightly better games than, let's say, of course, United, but then also has, some tough fixtures coming out of that, because half of the Newcastle run, I would say, is over, right? When you look at the fixtures, they've got Wolves and Aston Villa, but then actually after that, you've got Liverpool away, Spurs away, Man City away in the distance, although Brentford at home is sandwiched in there. So, Bruno G is interesting to me, but I think because the ownership is so high, because so many people are moving into him, I would like to sort of combat against Bruno G. And obviously it hasn't worked out recently, but that doesn't really suggest anything to me in terms of, do I feel like I'm missing out on such a game-breaking pick? I don't think so per se. And of course, Rice is great as well, but I do like the idea of Bruno long-term. So going Bruno is something that I can do in one move. Keane, however, I think should go out of my team as well. And 5.5 in the back is an interesting position, because I think this actually allows me to buy someone like a Chalobah right now. So, Chalobah is accessible here. And I think generally speaking, once again, to compare to Newcastle, I think the overall fixture run for Chelsea is still very much, about to start. It's not started. It's not halfway through. You would get the full benefit of it as long as Chalobah starts every single match, and I think he likely will. So Chalobah is a pick that I really like here in terms of going for both Chalobah and Bruno, and kind of locking in players that I just really want to have long term. And that's something that I've been thinking about. The alternative picks here would be, let's say if I don't go Chalobah, I guess I could go Virgil and Tavernier. So if I just reset the plan here, but let's just walk through Gameweek 23, actually. Let's just walk through how the team looks like over the next few weeks. And I think it's helpful to walk the team at least until Gameweek 24, because what I would say about Gameweek 23 is this isn't a particularly good Chelsea game, right? It's Crystal Palace away. It should still be a tough match. It should still be seen as a tough match. And if you rate Brentford, I guess you could wait to buy Chelsea players in Gameweek 24 instead. So where the run truly starts is Gameweek 24 here. So potentially there is an opportunity to buy into Chelsea a little bit later. And, that is something, to be cognizant of. At the same time, as I said, I don't think a lot of the transfers in that are alternatives that compete against that are that interesting to me. So that's kind of what I think about it. In terms of 23, I think the team still looks relatively solid. Would I move out of Tavernier or move out of Sobo into Tavernier? I think I actually would. I'm just not that intrigued really with keeping Sobo, but it is effectively a mirror matchup between Sobo and Tavernier. I don't think I necessarily need to force this move here. I don't think they're massively different as players, although Tavernier, when he gets to operate on the wings, just looks like much more interesting. Sobo will probably have to sort of deputize certain points in the game, in deeper positions. But I think also maybe just holding out for Enzo is an alternative, right? So let's say if I don't make a Tavernier move here, I think if I can move into Enzo at this point in time, that is something that would be quite preferable to me. The thing that I would want to think about myself is, because I've now closed my mind towards Palmer, just because I think his fitness isn't good enough, is there any alternatives? Do I need to do anything else with my FPL team? Are there any players that I want to move out? Potentially it's Foden. So I think having 2 free transfers in Game 24 is helpful, because if you see out the City players until Game 23, so O'Reilly, Foden, Haaland, etc., you still kind of need to make a move on 24, probably to take some of these players out, right? Like I think this is a good opportunity for me to take O'Reilly out, and maybe just by this point in time, I can see whether Foden's minutes look any good. Because I don't think Foden is massively worse than a lot of the midfielders in the game. Sure, he's gone super green, super hot, and then he's gone super cold, but that's kind of Foden at the end of the day. As long as the minutes are good, I think you're kind of putting yourself in a position to either succeed or to fail with him. And I think more often than not, given the team that he plays for, given the minutes that he's currently played so far, I think I'd be willing to bet that he's going to do well for you. But yeah, I mean, in 24, it might just be a case of just taking O'Reilly out of my team and then kind of shifting things along, where we just have a lot of interesting defensive picks that I think I can go to. No one exceptional. I think that kind of strikes out in Gameweek 24 because I've already invested into Chalobah. But, it's an opportunity to once again pick up maybe another Sunderland defender here and just save a little bit of money as well. Like I can always revisit a Mukiele, a Ballard as well, or even a Alderete, just watching what his minutes would be like post AFCON because they actually do have a lot of depth coming back into the team soon. And I'd like to see, who's going to lose a little bit more minutes in the future. As we could see with the previous match, I think Alderete actually got subbed off a little bit earlier. I would think that Mukiele is maybe still the best pick, but we'll just have to manage because Ballard's price is not too far off Mukiele now, and he could give me a pretty solid option that allows me to move away from O'Reilly. I'm also thinking about the other Man City center back in Alain. I think he's been added into the game. I think he just looks like such a good player. I could be completely wrong about his minutes, but I think, maybe later in the season I could see myself investing into him, but certainly not in this specific game week here. But just something to think about in terms of what my team needs in terms of transfers. Am I persisting with Saka blindly? Sort of. Am I persisting with Ekitike? Yes. But I think this is okay in terms of, how the season's going to pan out. Like even Enzo Lefebvre I can call upon for this specific game week here. So the team looks pretty solid. I don't feel too bad about making 2 free transfers this week and going a little bit more aggressive because I don't like Cunha and Keane is going to go for me anyways. Like when Keane comes back, I still think the Everton fixture run still is a bit mediocre, and I'd rather wait all the way until Game Week 28 to sort of make moves into Brentford players, which is where I think that's the point in time where I'm going to make Brentford picks. The alternative path, as I said, is something that's going to be, ignore Bruno because let's say we're really allergic to Arsenal away. We want to wait until Game Week 24 for Bruno. I think the reverse order of things almost is just going into Tavernier now or going into Enzo now and moving out of Cunha. So let's say I go into Enzo. I also maybe potentially just go jump Keane up into, let's say, potentially someone like Virgil at this point in time, just to kind of get the Burnley at home fixture and because I actually have a lot of budget in the team. The only thing I'd say is this kind of makes it a little bit tight in terms of getting Bruno in Game Week 23, but the team still looks reasonably solid in 23. I think Liverpool versus Bournemouth is a pretty good fixture for Liverpool, so I can't complain too much. At the same time, I think I'd be playing Lefebvre over Virgil. I think I'd easily even play Kroupi Jr. over Sobo. So am I even backing Liverpool in this match outside of Ekitike? Not really. In Game Week 24, though, this is the week where I think my team's a little bit weaker. So it's a case of nice to have Lefebvre here, but I think Sobo finally comes out for someone like Bruno. But I do need to make weight in the team. And I think, once again, it is O'Reilly out most likely in the midfield position to kind of fund that as well. So potentially it's as simple as a move like maybe going into, once again, a Sunderland defender, or we could go into a good Munson just to fill out the bench if we really feel like we need this 1.0 million in the bank for whatever reason. And then that could be, maybe a case of wanting to upgrade my team in a few weeks' time. So, for example, let's say Lefebvre, if I want him to be a Tavernier in Game Week 25, for example, after he's played Burnley at home, then I can do that. But it is a bit of an opportunity lost in terms of missing out on Tavernier versus Wolves away. So that's just something that I'll just need to monitor myself. I can't have them all per se. Like I think right now the decision, if I just go back to Game Week 22, is I kind of like 3 midfielders as transfer targets. I like Enzo, I like Tavernier, I like Bruno. I'm not going to have them all over the next 3 weeks. So who am I going to prioritize? Which 2 out of 3 am I going to go for? And then equally, which defenders am I going to move into? Because I know that I'm moving out of Keane. I know that I'm moving out of O'Reilly. That's already, once again, 2 other defenders as well. So 2 out of 3 midfielders to choose from, 2 out of 3 defenders to choose from, or 2 out of 2 rather. And I have to make those moves probably over the next 4 weeks here in FPL. And I'm kind of interested in just investing in the Chelsea run. That's personally kind of where I'm at. It might even be as simple as actually going maybe double Chelsea. So maybe Enzo and Chalobah this week if I really feel like I'm kind of betting against this Man United team at this moment in time. But we'll see. Bruno is still Bruno at the end of the day, and he's very tempting from that perspective. So I'd like to just kind of watch Arsenal versus City or Arsenal versus Chelsea in the EFL Cup match, and I think that will give me a little bit of flavor for what is this Chelsea team going to be like going forwards? How that could maybe impact Enzo and how I feel about Enzo, and then we can continue to play FPL from that point on. But those are my transfer plans at this moment in time. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. As I said this week, it's not the time for me to sell Liverpool players. So if anyone's, yes, obviously looking at Sobo and Ekitike in the team and kind of making the point that, of course, they've been awful. Yes, of course, they've been awful. And I do want to take them out, and I will take them out, but not versus Burnley at home. So that's kind of the overarching point there. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Take care, and I'll see you soon.